In our last episode, we spoke with 621 Productions about media preservation and the importance of recycling and reusing old media. During the episode, they spoke about an artist who takes some of their old media pieces and turns them into one-of-a-kind art. Not only are these art pieces beautiful and interesting in their appearance, they're also thought-provoking. They're a visual representation of the good that can come from finding ways to reuse old items rather than simply throwing them out. Welcome to The Good Guide to Business, a podcast presented by the Better Business Bureau.
The Good Guide is all about conversations with businesses, organizations, and local leaders who are going above and beyond to make our community a better place.
All right. So grab a cup of coffee, sit down, and get ready to hear from this episode's special guest, artist Leatha Koefler.
Very good.
So as you can see today, we are in our very own BBB studio once again. And we are talking all about art, sustainable art, its impacts. So again, Leatha, welcome to the show. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
So can you first just tell us how you got started creating art pieces like the ones that are at 621?
Oh, like the ones that are at 621.
Or just, let's start with just in general, how you started being an artist.
Well, I was in a house with a poet, a chef. My father was studying drafting, and my mother just could make anything, and my grandmother crocheted and cooked. So I was in this house with all these creative people. So, it had to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. But throughout the years, I've always been interested in art, and what I'm doing now came after my father passed away in 2010. I inherited 40 years worth of family slides.
Wow.
Yeah. And so all these crates came to my house with slides, and I felt kind of compelled to do something with them and not just leave them in the box. So, of course, I had them scanned and digitized, and then started thinking about how these memories that are on the slides affected my current life and what I could do to represent that.
Yeah. So then how did you start working with 621 Productions?
621. The daughter of the original owner was one of my students. And I found out what they did, and they were very generous, said, we have all of these things. Would you like to have them to use to make art? So they would donate pieces to the school, to the classroom, and my students would build things out of them. So that's how I got started. And then Jack took over, and he's been great to work with.
Yeah, they were great to talk to, and going into the studio and seeing your art there too, it got the gears turning in my head. This is something, obviously a lot of thought, a lot of time was put into this, and it's a great way to be sustainable. So, of course, we want to talk to you to learn more. Meredith and I have seen the art. For our viewers and listeners who maybe haven't, can you describe sort of what your pieces look like?
I can. The pieces that I do with slides, the slides are all stitched. They take them out of their little cardboard or plastic frames. So it's just the piece of film. And they're all laid out like a grid. And then I stitch them together with crochet thread. And frequently there are buttons where the four corners of the slides come together. And that's really to strengthen the structure, because I discovered that the edges of the slides were sharp and cut the thread. So if the thread was actually tied to the button rather than the film, but the film was just kind of attached to it, it was structurally more sound. So it's like creating a fabric out of all of these slides and then using that fabric to make something. And frequently those structures look like garments, dresses, shawls, sometimes more like a lantern or a light fixture. The other thing I do is work with floppy disks and VHS tapes. Floppy disks have been glued and riveted to painter's canvas in designs that look like quilts. You probably didn't see one of those, did you?
No.
I think the ones that we saw looked like they were on canvas, but they were like painted over in white, if I remember correctly. Is that what you're talking about?
And then that's the third one.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The quilt structures actually use layers of fabric like a quilt, and then instead of having rectangular or triangular pieces of fabric creating the design, I use floppy disks and cut them into triangles or use them as squares to create the quilt design. So they can be as big as a double bed. I mean, they're huge. Then the third thing is I create sculptural structures using all kinds of found media objects, like even reels from film, 8-track tapes, VHS tapes, and I just arrange them and glue them down and spray paint them white. I have started using their original colors, if I can find them with colors, which is fun. And people think I paint them, and I don't. Floppy disks came in orange and yellow and blue. They came in lots of different colors. Some are even transparent. Those are fun because the light passes through them. But those are, I'm planning to do, and I'm working on now, larger structures, maybe 6 feet tall.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one that stood out to me when we were in the studio at 621 Productions was the chandelier that they had above them, and how the slides were just dangling down from that.
Right.
And you look at individual slides and they're not that big, but that chandelier was a pretty big piece that I saw.
Yeah, and we even shortened it so it wouldn't touch people's heads as they come in. I do have a 9.5-foot chandelier.
Oh, wow.
That it was made with large reels and film and slides dangling. Yeah.
So it seems like your art pieces with the old media all involve kind of tying them together in some way, like literally or figuratively.
Literally.
Is there meaning behind that? What is the reason that you decided to do it that way?
To tie them together or use them?
I guess both.
I felt like the film and slides, I feel like I'm stitching my family back together. After my father died during that period of grieving, I took his pictures and I stitched pictures of my great-grandmother and my mother and me and my father and my brothers, stitched them all together like I was securing my family into place. So a lot of the structures look kind of like shawls, and I envision myself being wrapped with those shawls made of all these pictures and memories. The chandeliers, they're fun when they get light behind them. That one that you saw at 621, I don't believe was lit, but they're fun with the light because as you walk around them, especially in a dark room, the colors and the light comes through.
Oh, it pops off the slides?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So that's fun too, and if it moves, it makes it even more fun. That was actually motivated by a call for art at the Cameron Museum of Art in Wilmington. They've been having a exhibition they call Illumination. And so I thought, these are great with light behind them. I'll do that. So every year I've been trying to do something that I can put in that show.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really want to see that lit up now and see the colors pop off.
Yeah. The shawl-like structures, they're actually designed to hang about 18 inches off the wall. And when the light from the spotlights in the galleries goes through it, it casts the images on the wall behind it. And there are pictures on my website of what that looks like when they're lit that way. And I really like that because you get two totally different textures. You have the slides and the film themselves being illuminated and reflecting that light, and then the light going through and casting images on the wall. They're kind of fuzzy, but they're warm and they're very approachable. They're something that you want to get close to.
Yeah. Because
of the light on the wall.
And it probably looks different during what time of day you see it, right?
Absolutely.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Now, I know we talked about the chandelier and that, but is there one particular piece that you think has any sort of special importance to you?
I think the aprons. You didn't see the aprons, but
No.
I used slides and film like a fabric, and made aprons to represent my grandmothers. And one of them they both have heads made of slide carousels. And one of them has a camera in the middle of the carousel looking down, because I asked them to be displayed hanging from the ceiling and just a little higher than, about 6 feet, so that they're looking down on you like a grandmother would be looking at you. And the camera represents the fact that they always kept an eye on me. And then my father recorded everything that happened in our lives with his slides.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned the media you started working with was from your family, and it was media of your family.
Right.
And you turned it into art to represent things to do with your family. So now the media that you get from other places, like from 621, that is of random people or whatever it is it still representative of your family, or what does that mean?
It represents us as a family. All of us, the world family of humanity. Because what I've found by looking at all of these family slides from families around the world, I get slides from Vietnam and slides from Europe, Eastern Europe, that these families have the same kind of relationships that my family had with one another. It's not like I didn't know that. Because that the mother loves their child, but to actually see it all together in front of me made it very obvious that we're a world family, and we need to think about that.
That's really cool, and I didn't even consider that. And I imagine a lot of those slides, too, are from different eras across time. Do you see, these sorts of patterns and similarities from different places and different times as well?
Absolutely, from different times. I think the earliest slides I have are from the late 40s up until into the 70s, and then it seemed to stop.
Yeah.
But yes, time and place.
That's awesome.
Similar.
Where do you get media from other than 621 Productions to use?
When I was at school and still teaching, I would come to work in the morning and there'd be a plastic bag hanging on my doorknob with things in it, and I really am not sure where they came from, but people donate them. And when people come to my studio, I did have a public studio for about 10 years, and on First Fridays, people would come visit the studio and see what I did, and would always offer what they had. They would say, I have my mother's and father's slides and family films, and I need to have them digitized, and I'd give them the card from 621, and then they'd bring them to me, or they'd already had them, and then they'd already had them digitized, and they were being stored. And this way they no longer had to store it, but it was became functional, became something that reached further than their own family. And I have done commission pieces for specific families. They would bring me their slides and ask me to put something together. One woman even brought me a bunch of buttons that were important from her daughter's childhood, and I incorporated those into the piece.
Is that how you got started using buttons, or were you already using buttons?
The buttons started right away after I saw that the thread was being cut by the edges of the film. Mm-hmm. My grandmother and mother and I all saved buttons. I mean, if you're going to throw a piece of clothing away, cut the buttons off. Mm-hmm. The fabric, can actually be recycled now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. But I started with the buttons right away. And the buttons actually make it a very time-consuming process.
I'd imagine, yeah.
Yeah. So I have found another way to put the slides together without using the buttons, and the buttons simply become decorative at that point, and it's a little faster.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And it seems like, from the buttons to the slides to everything, it's not just a beautiful piece of art. It's great that those are landing somewhere where it has meaning as opposed to in a landfill or somewhere else.
Absolutely. That is a problem I have. I don't like throwing things away. My mother says even as a child, she'd go into my room and open a drawer and it'd be full of pieces of paper and, and things that I just put in the drawer because I see all of those things as resources, not as waste. Heck, why shouldn't I save a little piece of red paper? I might need a little piece of red paper just that size. So I've been doing that all my life. And I guess that's why I like hardware stores. Whenever my father wanted to go to the hardware store, I was there, ready to go, because it just looks like resources, things to use to create. And I think our landfills are probably full of things that we could use to make furniture, to create art.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So 621 Productions puts some of your art on display.
Yes.
What do you think is the importance of that for people that come in and see it?
They're usually surprised when they see it. And I think what it does is to create a spot in time. It's a time when a lot of these things are analog, and there was a period of time when things converted from analog to digital. And all of a sudden, all of those analog things became unimportant. Can you imagine how important some of these things were to people before digital came into use? These were important to people. And then all of a sudden, they're not important anymore. And that concept of something that was very important being ready to hit the landfill and no longer be important, I think that concept is something we need to think about. And also, I think it documents that point in history. I had an 8-year-old, I think the child looked like an 8-year-old come into a show, and he stood in front of a large piece made with all of these, floppy disks and VHS tapes and 8-tracks and things. And he just stood there for the longest time studying it. And I was really surprised that a child that age would spend so much time looking. And then he turned around and looked at me and he said, "What are these things?" And I loved it. Yeah, I think that's what's kind of important about it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the time when things started not being important anymore, because I feel like in now and over the past few decades, especially, the life cycle of items has sort of shrunk and continues to shrink.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
To where it goes from being important, relevant, to not anymore, out
Right.
of style or whatever it is.
And it takes up space, so we want to get rid of it.
Yeah. But that just keeps getting faster and faster, it seems like.
I think one of the reasons I think about all of these things as resources rather than items to discard is because of my mother's ranching family. And when I talk about a ranching family, I'm not talking about a lovely, beautiful ranch with, no, we're talking about people who went in a covered wagon, bought some land, planted a garden, built a house with the rocks, right there on the land, and they survived using what they had. But when something was no longer useful to them, they didn't throw it away. First of all, there wasn't trash pickup, so you couldn't just put it out to the curb. And the curb was almost 17 miles from the house, so you couldn't. But one of the old corrals, it was like their dumping ground. They would put things in the corral, put some things in the barn, that the weather would destroy. And my grandmother would keep any textiles, clothing in the house, and she made things out of them, reused fabrics. But I remember my great aunt telling my uncle, when he said, "I need a blah, blah, blah," I don't remember what it was. And she said, "Well, just go look in the corral. You'll find what you need to make that." So those things, those resources were not discarded. They were kept and reused. That would be difficult at my house because I don't have a place to keep all of that. I don't have 17 miles to the curb where I have space to keep all of those things.
Right, yeah. Do you want to take a commercial break?
Yeah, I think we're going to stop for just a second to thank some of our sponsors, and we'll be right back. This episode of the Good Guide to Business podcast is brought to you by Ultra Roofing. Ultra Roofing is a family-run roofing business serving the Triangle and surrounding areas with over 15 years of experience. Through our business, we cherish the opportunity to share our life, passion, and success with those that we love and trust.
At Ultra Roofing, we take pride in the roofs we install because our name and reputation are at stake. "We got you covered" is more than just a slogan. It's our mantra. We treat every roof we install with the utmost care. We don't take shortcuts, and we don't use lesser quality materials. What you say about us matters, and we don't take any job for granted. When you work with Ultra Roofing, you won't be disappointed with the end result.
Visit ultraroofing.net today or call 800-977-3110. That's 800-977-3110. So one of our questions we were planning to ask was about being intentional with having art in the workplace. Do you have things you'd like to say about that?
Whatever you do whatever a business owner or employer does in the workplace to change an employee's environment makes the employee feel more valued. Mm-hmm. And that's a strange thing, but you can put light bulbs in and they feel more valued. You can take light bulbs out and they feel more valued because it shows that the employer is thinking about the environment their employees work in.
Okay.
Artwork can have a similar effect, but it definitely could have that kind of effect. But it also can provide a respite from the workday. Yeah. Just kind of like your plants do.
Yeah, we didn't have any decoration in here when we made our first episode, and our boss was like, "It looks sad."
And she was right. It was cold.
Right.
It was sad. It was bare.
We would have live plants, but I think they would die back here.
Yeah, there's no light in here for live plants. But also colors and the movement in a piece of artwork can also affect people. A large painting that I sold to a company once had a very interesting use of color, kind of an acid green and purple, and very sharp, jagged lines. And the person who sat across from that became very agitated. And we took the painting back and replaced it with something else because it can affect you. So it's something that you need to think about when you put artwork into a work environment. But that idea of a respite is really nice because you throughout the day, if you're working really hard and you're very busy, to just take a second to look up and see what's there helps calm you. So I really like the idea of employers having a relationship with artists that allow them to rotate the artwork.
Yeah.
Kind of on a monthly or bi-monthly basis or every 6 months. And instead of purchasing it, they rent it. So you could have a contract with an artist to do this on a regular basis.
I didn't know that was a thing, and that sounds really beneficial, especially for the business, because it keeps things fresh, right? And having different pieces, each piece causes people to think. Right. If you rotate it, you'll always be thinking. Always
having something new to motivate you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah.
I could see how, I'm not an artist, but I could see how in the art world there's the opportunity to have a lot of waste involved in creation of things. Mm-hmm. So obviously that's not so much an issue for you because you purposefully reuse things that already served a purpose. But what do you have to say about having an environmental goal in art?
I'm trying to think of what kind of waste there would be.
I mean, I guess I could see with an artist who makes things out of paper or whatever that they end up, having scraps and things that just sort of get thrown away if you don't really think about using them. Mm. But I'm also saying that not as an artist, so I don't know.
Most of the artists whose studios I visit who use things and that produce scraps actually use the scraps later on. Even works of art that they think may not be successful are painted over and repainted. I don't see a lot of waste. There might be with some artists, but most of the ones I know really use most of what they
Well, maybe that's
buy.
a note to people who are not artists to learn from artists then.
Yeah.
And there may be artists who throw a lot away, but I haven't noticed that actually.
Yeah. So I guess then my next question would be what can the general world take from an artist's perspective about being thoughtful about using their scraps and using all of the items that they have access to?
One of the things that I think about on a regular basis is, for instance, when I go get the cereal box out of the cabinet, I realize how that cereal box doesn't have a lot of purpose except to sell the product.
Yeah.
And the bag inside is the functional part of that. And I'm sure that it's easier to put all of those cereal boxes in a crate or whatever more easily than bags. But as an artist, I look at that box and go, okay, I could make this out of that box. And I could. I could drive myself crazy making things out of all of these boxes and packages and things that would go into the trash. But I realize I have to draw the line and stop. There's just not time for me to do it all. But I think if you're not going to use it for something, and there are plenty of things you could do with old cereal boxes and paper and things like that in your garden, in your yard. You just have to have the time to do it.
Yeah.
But perhaps we could ask people not to produce all of that waste.
I feel like the aspect of time in this situation is really interesting because, you invest the time to find a creative way to reuse or recycle, or you potentially lose time at the end where the environment is impacted by this kind of stuff.
Interesting thought. Very good.
You sound like a teacher.
I am. I've always been a teacher.
So where can people listening see your art in person?
Right now, it's in about 4 different places, but those things change on a regular basis. My website, and it's lethakoefler.com. Unfortunately, I don't have an easy name.
We'll be sure to plug that in descriptions and elsewhere so people can just click the link.
So most of my artwork, a lot of my artwork, the artwork we're talking about, is on that website. I do other things as well that aren't part of that website, and as I do things on a daily basis, I take snapshots and I put them on my Instagram account. So there are different things, or some things in process on my Instagram account. I will be having a show at the Pullen Art Center in September of next year. So it's a year from now, and there'll be a lot of pieces there. I will have a piece at the Cameron Museum of Art in December. So their shows pop up and go away.
Yeah.
What is your Instagram?
My Instagram is Leatha Koefler.
Okay, good.
That's it. And it's one word, and when you put all those letters together, it's like crazy.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't get an Instagram handle with just my first and last name, but I guess you have a unique name, so you were able to do that. That's nice.
Well, I certainly couldn't.
Yeah,
I imagine there's a million other people with my name. Well, Leatha, thank you so much for coming to the office, visiting our studio, and talking to us.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. I like talking about about art.
All right. Well, to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Good Guide to Business.
Be sure to follow us on social media at BBB Eastern NC. That is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. If you're not watching this episode on YouTube, you can find us at BBB Eastern NC on YouTube as well. And of course, go listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, basically any other platform where you can find podcasts. We're going to be there. And we release episodes every other Wednesday so keep an eye out on those days.
All right, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.